Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, and today I'm hanging out with the Mistress of Maps, Devin Rue. How are you today, this morning?
I'm pretty damn good.
Excellent. I stumbled across your work on Twitter, I believe, one of your maps, and I was like, wow, this is just amazing. And then at some point after that, I reached out to you, and here we are.
Yes.
So, guys, as always, in the description, you can find links to Devin's work, to her website, social media, all that good stuff. Go check it out. It's very, she does amazing work. Her cartography is like fantastic. Her illustrations are really good. So definitely check it out.
They're okay.
And apparently, we're talking beforehand. Apparently, you're also a big Skyrim fan, judging by the maps.
Huge, huge Elder Scroll fans. Yes.
I've kind of like sworn off video games. I went cold turkey a couple of years back
Oh, why?
because it was like I could do Nerdarchy or it just becomes this huge time sink. A little bit of like a happy medium for a while was just playing League of Legends because I could play a game or two and be done with
Right.
it. But the Nerdarchy work really picked up. At the time, I was working a full-time job, and my wife and kids want to see me sometimes. So it's like
Imagine that.
I know.
The nerve.
I know. Isn't it good enough we just live in the same house? Couldn't that be enough? But no.
Right? Do I now have to interact with you? What the hell? The nerve of people.
Actually, that's actually not too far from my personality because, like, if my wife gets away from the kids for a period of time, it's like the kids, and I get away for a moment. I'm like, I just need doses. Like, I need 5 minutes here and there, and I'm good.
Right.
Anything more than that, they start getting on your nerves anyway.
This is why I just don't have kids.
That would be a fix. Well, one of them just kind of happened, and my wife was all about the kid thing, so.
Thankfully enough, my wife isn't.
So.
And we can't have an accident, so not without a miracle, so we're good.
Yeah, lucky you.
Yeah.
So, how did you get into cartography?
The very first map I ever made was actually to dispute an argument that I was having in my D&D group.
Did you win the argument?
Yes, I did. The argument, it was one of those groups where you're playing for 5 minutes and then you're arguing or talking for like an hour about the 5 minutes that you got to play. Which is obviously not a group for me. But we were arguing over where we were and how, we were trying to get from point A to point B. And of course, like every other group, you meander quite a lot. And so I drew like a really quick and very horrible looking map, like just basically like a circle, like start, and then where we were going, and then the squiggly line of how we got there, where we interacted with everything, where we got attacked, and then proved our argument, went back to playing or arguing about other things. And then I just started filling in the map while they were arguing over stuff I didn't care about. And hour or two later, the DM leans over and he's like, "Hey, can I borrow that?" I was like, "Yeah, no, you can have it. Have fun." And so he did. And he was actually the first DM that I had that I made a map for, because we started really filling it in. And then we inadvertently made a world for him that we were all playing in. And I did that for most of my DMs for years. Had no idea I should probably be doing it for a living, though.
Nice. So I guess that kind of answered my follow-up question was going to be, do you still have that map? But apparently not.
No, he does. I don't know if he still has it. I haven't talked to him in quite a long time. But I know that for a long time he used that world with his other players and everything. And I kept making the joke, like, you're not allowed. It was my world. I helped make it, but I was fine with it.
So the questions are already starting to pop up in the chat here. How do you differentiate between roads, rivers, and borders on black and white pencil sketches for a first draft?
So if you ever, actually, I should probably post those, but some of my first drafts look really horrible. And the only reason I know that there's a river as opposed to like a road is because I put it there. So I kind of know. But I create roads as dashes. Rivers are just the, the two squiggly lines that follow each other. As far as, well, I know where the continent would be because a river doesn't run the same width as the continent. I don't know. Like I kind of, those make sense.
So you just know.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's kind of hard to. If you watch my Twitch streams, I make maps from beginning to end in stream. I think the only thing I don't do is if I'm making a commission map, I don't draw the rough draft because I usually have to draw it like a couple times, get them to approve it, type of thing, and then I just ink it on live stream. But you can actually watch me make it, and then I actually explain the process while I'm doing it. So it's a little bit easier when I'm in the moment, I guess. I don't know. I just know. I'm psychic.
Do or do not.
Yeah.
Zoiva RPG maps, rivers have fish and roads have highwaymen. See, there you go. Obviously.
There you go. Yeah. Duh.
Kenyetta said, can I please GM for you for free maps? I think you missed the boat on that one.
I've actually thought about it. I am going to hopefully one day have some Patreon. So I have a Discord that's Patreon only, or patrons only, excuse me. So I was thinking of actually doing some games in there and having them, if they wanted to DM a one shot with me or not, would be cool. Fingers crossed I have 5 minutes to do so, but yeah. And yeah, I do a lot of art exchanges for maps, so you never know.
Ooh. So yeah, you have a Patreon, and you also on your website there's a membership area as well. Yes. Where you can access all the cool stuff you're doing.
Yeah. They're both exactly the same. It's just it was kind of an answer to Patreon's huge mess up last month. I had membership on my website previously, and literally just days before this all happened, I took it off, thinking like, oh, I wanted to update the security on it and everything else. And then, of course, Patreon decided like it was going to start charging people without letting us have any say in it. And so I had to put it back on there, but they're exactly the same. So whether it's on my website or Patreon, either way, you get to still join the Discord. All the rewards are the same across, and you get to have a map. I make maps now for patrons for any level reward, or get added to the queue.
So you have an invitation in the chat to join a map making webinar if you wish to accept from Fantasy Grounds College.
Oh wow, that is
always
awesome.
Doing kind of cool and interesting things. And again, guys, all of Devin's information is in the description, so you can find that. So if you want to reach out to Devin, you guys can discuss that.
Oh yeah, by all means, send me a message.
Living?
Hell no.
maps of places, I should say maps of places that don't exist for a living or not physically exist.
Yeah, no, not even remotely close. The funny thing is like I really got into like landscape design. So my father is now retired, but he was an arborist and worked a lot with trees, and we don't get along very well. And when I was younger, and like most kids, you want to find some kind of common ground with your parent. So I took up landscape design and started drawing it and everything else, honestly believing that somehow I'd be able to work with him with it. That didn't work out so well, but I learned how to draw landscapes, which is why I actually draw in the perspective that I do. So I actually thought I would be doing landscape drawings for a living at one point, but that just did not happen. Life kind of had its way, regardless. So
would you mind telling your story? Kind because I had read your about page, and you have a really interesting story, and I also think it's inspiring for people as well.
My story about what?
You know how you became a cartographer, an artist.
Well, I sorry, stumbling over words this morning. It's still the morning for me.
Yeah.
No, I actually started. I don't remember what I have in my about page. It's one of the reasons I'm like my story. I actually started at 12. I had a fantastic art teacher that just handed me a bunch of pastels and a big piece of paper and said, make whatever you want. And of course, the first thing I actually made was a landscape. So, and then by 17, I started selling professionally. I do paintings and everything, or did, on canvas, had gallery showings, lots of fun. It was great. But I ended up with a corporate job doing what I absolutely love doing. I was an efficiency manager, which I'm now still putting to use because I started live streaming, talking about becoming an artist and starting a small company and everything else. And essentially how to make it a lot easier when you're just you and your partner doing something. And then I really didn't like the art world. You know, it's very impersonal. Somebody would buy a painting and I would never hear from them again, or I'd never know what happened with the painting, which was kind of like sad. You know, I like the connection. So I turned to, in 2009. Yeah, 2009, I decided I was going to leave the whole corporate world, everything else, work for myself, become a full-time artist, and decide what I wanted to do. I expressed this wanting to change everything to my wife, and she said, have you ever taken up wood burning? And I was like, no, I'm blind. Why on earth would I take a hot implement? So oddly enough, though, she had a wood burner right there, and I was like, all right, I'll try it. So I did. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it. It turned out really well. And I just started, I think I started learning it in 2011, which is the same year that Skyrim came out. And that I actually have here. So I make prop maps for all of my DMs because I'm crazy. And so the map that came with the game was okay, but I decided I wanted to make my own prop map. So it's all on aged paper and everything else. So I drew it out and shared it. I was like, hey, look what I made. And the next thing I know, I had a ton of people like, hey, can you make me one? And then I had somebody ask me if I would make a map for Ed Greenwood, which I thought they were lying. And if you don't know who he is, he created Faerun.
He's essentially Illuminster.
Yeah. And someone asked me if I would make him a map on leather, because I was already making maps on leather and stuff like that at the time, as a gift. And I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, you want me to make one for Ed Greenwood? I believe you, type of thing. Until I actually got the payment and address and everything else on. I was like, I'm really making a map for Ed Greenwood, And I know whenever he shares it, because I get a ton of people asking me a bazillion questions. And now it sits in his office over his writing desk, which is my huge claim to fame. And it's pretty much, that's been it since.
What is the map of?
It's of Faerun. Like all of Faerun.
Nice. That's pretty sweet. That's a huge claim to fame.
It's a huge map.
Ed Greenwood is one of the ones I've been slowly stalking to get on the show.
He's awesome to talk to. If you get on Twitter, he has huge conversations with people. He's really, really personable.
Yeah. It's like he's one of those guys I kind of like grew up with. Yeah, reading his articles in Dragon Magazine, seeing his work.
Oh, yeah. I was making all sorts of really strange noises when I realized I was actually making a map for Ed Greenwood. Like, yeah.
That's fun. That's awesome. Now, I find it interesting that your wife is like, why don't you try wood burning? It seems like wood burning seems like an off the wall thing, like jump to. Like, I'm thinking about doing art. Really? Have you tried wood burning?
Right? No, she said it's just because I think it's the way that I make. She knows, well, obviously she knows that I'm partially blind, and so up until that point, I actually had a really hard time with illustration because I see the world in 2-dimension. So when you start drawing, it's just a flat line and there's no shading to it, and it's really kind of hard to see where the shading should belong if you don't see the world in 3-dimension. So my illustrations are always very limited, but when you are wood burning, you have a nice crisp edge and then a shaded side, so it automatically adds more depth to it than just a pen would, or even, almost like turning a pencil, sideways and getting that shading going on. So that that kind of lent to it. And if it wasn't for the wood burning, I wouldn't actually be as into doing the cartography and the illustrations as I am now. So it was a great step in that direction.
It was what you needed at the time.
Oh, yeah. And it was great because I really, I dove into, like, when I find a new art form that I really love, I just dive into it at 90 miles an hour. And and I really did. I absolutely love doing it. It's a great hands-on thing. And there's a couple of videos on my YouTube where you can kind of see, I think mostly tavern signs being created. So it's a lot of fun.
I will say one thing. Your social media needs to be organized a little better. It was hard finding links.
In general, or well, YouTube, I haven't done that much, so I haven't been really posting a link to it anywhere, unfortunately.
So I'm used to tracking people down. So you were a little tougher. Like, it was like once I found your Twitch, it got easier from there.
Really, Twitch is the place where everyone finds me on Twitter.
Well, I did, but your Twitter's linked to you only get one link in Twitter, and it's the Patreon.
I know.
From there, figure out. And then I saw somewhere about, oh, you know how I found your Twitch? Because you posted about doing one of your live draws. So I was like, now I got them. So,
yeah. Well, I'm
an internet tracker. That's what I do.
Well, I'm an efficiency manager, and I know that I'm pretty much wasting a lot of time on other social media. Twitter is where I get my most interaction, and that's where I spend most of my time. So I tend to just do everything on there.
Makes sense. No, absolutely. As someone who does a lot of different social medias and and picks and chooses which battles to fight,
right?
I've always told people when they ask me, I'm like, what should they do? I'm like, one, make sure it's a place you actually want to hang out.
Right.
Like Reddit has huge value, but I can't stand Reddit. So I just don't go over there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I get a bunch of stuff going on in Reddit, and I'm like, I'll get links every once in a while from someone like, oh, yeah, your stuff is on there. I was like, fantastic.
I bet they love your work over there. They're very picky there. Let's just say that.
Yes. Yes, they are.
And I'm sure if you ever did a map of something that's already existed, they just put one mountain in the wrong place, you would never hear the end of it.
I already do that now. One of the reasons, doing anything with Faerun was absolutely daunting was because I was like, oh man, if I put anything in the wrong place, everyone's going to know, because we've all, traversed that map numerous times, especially considering, yes, there's someone behind me. Hide. My wife, we live in a house. We do stuff. Yeah. The only reason that there's actually a curtain behind me is because there's a window behind me as well. And so you would just have this big shining light behind me. So otherwise, you'd be able to see her in full view, watching her in the sink. We don't hide the fact that we live here. I'm sorry.
Well, I happen to just find a nice corner in the basement, so there's only concrete.
Yeah. Normally, she's not here when I do stuff like this, but because you're on the East Coast, it's 9:30 almost this morning. So
yeah, it's still early.
Yeah.
Depending on what your day cycle goes by. So Kyle has a question about mapping.
Okay.
He wants to know about, could a cube-shaped planet be done well enough as a map in 2D, or would it be better for me to make it a globe and paste a map on each side?
Huh. Okay, well, if it's a cube, then it's great. Then yeah, totally. If you can do it in 3D, then yeah. Why even bother? I mean, no matter what, the map itself is drawn in 2D, because that's how we draw everything. Unless you want to sculpt it, and then you could totally make it into a 3D object. But yeah, make it a cube and draw a map on each side. Or a globe, however you want to phrase that. But yeah, trying to convey that on just a flat piece of paper and drawing the cube on it isn't going to look nearly as good. Green screen everything. No, I like people letting know I actually live in this place. This is my house. I'm perfectly okay with that.
Even us, when we decided to upgrade things, we could have just got a green screen, and it probably would have been cheaper too.
Oh yeah.
But we decided to, build a set, well, by build a set, I mean get tables, chairs, and bookcases. But that's not where I'm at now, but where we shoot most of our stuff.
Right.
But we decided to go with a physical set instead. Plus, I feel like because we usually have multiple people in the shot at the same time, it's just easier to have a set than it is a green screen. And then we'd have to figure out lighting, and we're just not that good.
Yeah. I'm very, very big on, this is me, no matter what. I don't want to pretend like I'm a bigger company than I am. I don't want to pretend that I'm any more of a professional than I actually am. I'm sitting here in fuzzy cat pajamas, Yeah, this is, I'm a very real person, and I really like the idea of people that make sure or that express that, and share that with other people.
So Dual 810 is a question for you. Favorite race in the TES series and why?
Oh, favorite race to play? Well, my favorite race is the Khajiit, just because they're gigantic cat people. But I don't normally play them because right now I'm playing Skyrim, and for some reason I always want to play the race that comes from that area because I like the dialogue better. Because your dialogue changes depending on the race that you play. So I guess right now I'm playing I'm playing a Nord because you only play one character at a time.
Yeah. Since you mentioned the fuzzy cat pajamas, it gets cold in my
Yeah. Now, I really dislike everyone's like, oh, the whole smoke and mirrors of trying to pretend that you're a bigger company than you are. Why? I'm an artist. It's just me. I'm the only one making it. I'm not going to lie to you and try to pretend that I'm something I'm not. This is my house.
You don't have a sweatshop in China with kids pumping out maps?
I do, but I'm not allowed to talk about it.
We could tell you, and we'd have to kill you.
Yeah. Then I have to hunt down everyone in chat and kill them.
When you were tabletopping, all D&D, you play different games?
Most of the games I actually played were homebrewed. Probably more D&D than anything else. I've played a Lord of the Rings tabletop, which is one of my favorites to play because it was great. I really want to try. So Dragon Age, there's now a tabletop version of, which I would love to actually play. just because I play the video games and they look cool.
I'm pretty sure if you just send out a tweet saying you'd love to play that, you'd find a table in no time fast.
I would love it. I really would. It's just a matter of finding time. I have, if you go on my website, you know that my queue is about 8-9 months out. So I'm a really busy person. And it's either I get to play the game or I get to make maps. And I'm pretty sure most people would prefer I make the maps.
It's tough. I mean, adulting's hard. We have to make decisions.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I love it. I feel like I'm in so many people's games. I know so much about their worlds, about their races. I help. There's quite a few people. Like we end up world building and talking about what they want to like, because when you're making the map, you actually help creating a culture. So I actually offer a cartography course, and in one part of it I explain how the land that that these people live in it helps develop their culture. It helps decide their gods. It helps decide what they consider unique about their people. I talk about there's a village that is on the bank of a river, and whenever the river overflows, it turns up like all this red clay, and it turns the river blood red, and all of their clothes are red, all of their bricks and everything would be red, and they use it as a form, so they dam further up the river, and if ever they go to get attacked, they unleash it, and it looks like the river turns to blood, and it scares their enemies. And things like that really change. Not only does it name, the river, it names the town, and it helps decide the culture of that people, And so I end up doing a lot of world building with people when I help create their maps.
Do you have a favorite, or someone that's kind of brought you something so cool and unique?
Oh God, probably one of the most unique worlds that I got to share a lot in, and apparently I now am a goddess in, is Eddie Friedman on Twitter. I made a map for him. Absolutely loved it. We did so much detail into it. He'll probably tell you that he bugged the hell out of me, but it was pretty cool. But I loved it. It was a lot of fun to do. So it's probably one of my more favorite maps, just to create the world of, much less how it turned out.
What elements of that kind of stood out to you? That
just well, I don't want to give up too much of, because I do exclusive work, so things I kind of can't share.
Okay.
So, but he put some really unique elements to his world that I was like, wow, I wouldn't have thought of that at all. Even his races and their particular, his pantheon was really interesting. So I should put it that way. I don't want to say anything else because I don't know how much he's actually posted on the internet yet. So
okay,
I don't want to give his world away.
I don't want to get you in trouble.
Yeah, please don't.
So Edwin has a mapping question. Do you take geography and climate into mind when drawing a map? I tend to get bogged down in things like that. Okay, is this a desert area in the world, and why would it be a desert?
Yes. Again, my cartography course kind of goes into how that, how to kind of take that into consideration when you're creating a world, not just because you get to fill in the map more, because it's usually the hard part is what on earth would I put there and why? But also so it makes sense. One of the reasons that so many people like my maps is because geographically they make sense. They look like they all fit together for the most part. There are some things where someone's like, well, I want a desert at the bottom of this, frozen landscape. And I was like, that doesn't normally happen, right? Or a hot desert, because there's obviously more than one type of desert. But I actually go into the different types of landscapes and everything else, and why. But I mostly do it with I do it because I want it to kind of convey its own story about the world that is being created. So when I help other people make their worlds, if you have a specific story, don't ever use the term "because magic" to explain why something is a particular way in your world. Mostly because not only does that make for a bad map, but also it makes for bad storytelling. You know, you can have a giant crevice in the ground that was an explosion caused by magic. That's fine. But just on a whim to make this because, you know, you screwed up on the landscape and you decided to put an arid desert next to a frozen tundra. Oh, well, there's a magical line there that made it happen. How about no? How about just not have that? You know? And I'll be honest with you, you know, most players really don't remember the amount of detail that the DM does about the world. Just so you know.
No, that is an excellent point. And we kind of talk about that all the time. Like, what are you doing it and who are you doing it for?
Yeah.
If you're doing it for your players, you should probably stop. If you're doing it because you enjoy it, well, fine.
Yeah.
You know, because you know, the things that they're going to latch onto are going to be things that you were probably inconsequential to you at the time when you threw them in there.
My favorite story of that is when I very first started DMing. I invited a bunch of people. So essentially what happened is they decided where we were going to start playing and the premise of how we were starting. And they all got this invitation and blah, blah, blah. And I made an entire, so they were originally meeting in a banquet hall for the local town council. And I'm describing it. And for some reason, I decided that there was like silver goblets. And one of my players just decided that there was something going on with those goblets. Why would you describe what they look like? I was like, I don't know. They're just silver goblets on the table. I don't know. Just so you know that it's a more posh place. And he was so obsessed with believing that if someone drank out of one of these goblets, either they were going to die or there was a potion in it. I was like, no, can we just move on with it? And he stole all the goblets and kept drinking from them until one of them did something.
So did one eventually do something?
No. I was like, there's none of those were enchanted. They weren't poisoned. There was no potion. And he obsessed and he stole like 24 of them, I think. And we kept ticking them all off every time he drank out of it.
And he had to drink out of each one.
He drank out of it, and he did. And I was like, okay, but we're not going to stop so you can sit there and drink out of 24, you know, in a row. So we actually made it so every time that they were camping, and he's like, okay, I'm going to drink from one of the goblets. I was like, okay. He's like, all right. I was like, take another one off the list. He's like, all right. He's like, I drink from the goblet. Does anything happen? I'm like, no. Your thirst is quenched.
Yeah. What are you gonna do, player?
You can go on to just making a bunch of maps and not DMing anymore.
I probably would end up doing something with the goblets because he was so obsessed with it.
Oh, that's why I didn't.
Eventually, he gets like silver poisoning or something.
Right? Oh, that I should have done. Yeah, I didn't think about that part.
So from drinking from all these, they were posh, but they were shoddily made.
Right? And I have silver poisoning.
Your bloodstream.
I didn't even think about that. I was just like, no, nothing happens.
I had players that they came into the game and their characters were on a quest to find the Fayglow.
Mm-hmm.
And they were goblins based off of juggalos. And I didn't even know what a juggalo was until they decided to play them in my game.
Nice.
So Fayglow is, I guess, the soda that juggalos drink. So we just extended it to Fayglow. So eventually I did give them a chalice that once per day could produce Fayglow for them.
Nice.
Presented by the Goblin King. So
there you go. For the most part, I usually will accommodate, whatever my players are kind of like pushing for to a degree, as long as it kind of fits the narrative. But sometimes I'm like, no, you're just not going to force it to happen just because there's 24 silver goblets. And it became a running joke for the longest time. Like any silver goblet that anytime they came into a room, what color are the goblets? And if they were silver, the whole group would steal them and like you should drink from this one. So we had a rash of silver goblet thievery.
You needed to set a bounty hunter upon them.
Yeah, I was actually, if we were going to keep playing, I said that they were slowly tanking the economy because they were stealing all the silver.
They were going to wait and then one day re-release it all back into the economy and truly destroy it.
Yeah, right? Bastards. They were not, we were kids. We were just out of the murder hobo phase. Just out of it.
I don't know if stealing goblets really, maybe almost out of it.
Yeah, no, we were still doing really stupid shit. We were still doing really stupid shit.
That was the evolution for gamers that have been gaming for a while. I think like now it's completely different. It's a different landscape. Yeah. Like players actually come into the game role playing. It's almost unheard of in my generation when we started. Like,
yeah, I was the oddity that I started playing at 14, and by 16 I was a LARPer. I was like, oh yeah, no. Now they call them cosplayers. So,
I don't know. I think there's a line between LARP and cosplay because the cosplayers don't beat each other with styrofoam sticks.
Cosplayers I know do.
Oh,
I work with a lot of cosplayers. Yeah, they do.
Oh, maybe I'm completely off. Never mind.
Yeah.
My partner Ted, he actually ran a LARP for like 5 years.
Nice.
And LARP for a while until they had kids. And again, it goes back to kids ruin everything.
They do. Let me tell you.
Then the LARPing stopped.
Yeah, that's exactly why we stopped the LARPing as well. We had a friend who had a nice big piece of property, and we would always go to we would have entire weekends, so it was awesome. And then he had kids, and
that was that.
That was the end of it. We kept waking his kids up, and his wife was like, "I'm gonna kill you all." I was like, "Okay, we're sorry."
Yeah, your new big bad.
Yeah. And she was a LARPer too, so she understood, but she was like, no, it's 3 a.m. Fucking go back to sleep. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, being woken up by a screaming kid is kind of special.
So I've heard.
So Fantasy Ground College wants to know, have you looked into any or participated in some of the world building or campaign management websites such as World Anvil?
No.
World Anvil is a free one, and it's really a really nice setup.
A lot of that stuff, like if I'm building my own world, which is very rare these days. I'm actually usually building it with other people. To be completely honest, the majority of people are really, really stubborn about what's going on in their world, that I really only get cartography input, and that's about it. So, and when I make my own maps, I'm usually doing them because I listen to what DMs are looking for in the maps that they're creating. And I'm usually, because I pay a lot of attention to the response that I get from not only DMs, but players and what they like in the maps that I create. So most of the ones I'm making, I'm not building a world for, because I'd much rather have a DM build the world for it. Create the culture, create the people, the race. I love hearing that stuff. So that's why I offer a lot of my maps blank on a certain rewards level. Fill them in, give them names, give them cultures. I love hearing those stories.
I might take you up on that at some point. We actually did some world building last night. We did a live stream with one of the patrons, and we just kind of like started from scratch building a world.
Oh, it's so much fun, and I love doing it, but I also love seeing what other people come up with. I mean, I've had people come up with some pretty awesome stories to the maps that I've made. I was like, really? Wow, I'm okay, sure. Not at all what I was thinking.
Well, that can absolutely be fun too, is like releasing something into the wild and seeing how it comes back to you.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's awesome.
So we get a question from Matthew Lyons. What are some interesting geographic features you could add to a map to make it unique?
Well, so the hard part about that is that so I keep a list of features just on a simple piece of, on OneNote, actually, because I love OneNote. And I just keep it open in front of me. And so when I start drafting a landscape, if there, for whatever reason, if there happens to be a part of it that isn't really all that filled in, I start looking at the geography around it and decide what would be there. I love adding in things that people don't expect, like farms, windmills, waterfalls, or things that for some reason you never see on anyone's maps. Things that, I tell everyone, like, go on Google Maps, put it on the satellite view, and just start, looking at it from the out from space, so to speak, and then just pick an area and start zooming in. And you start to see all these really cool looking things just magically appear on the, on the maps before you, and great, huge landscapes, walls, like, the Great Wall of China, but also you start seeing sculptures, huge sculptures that people make, things that they spell out in rocks, like just like all these really unusual things that, I mean, granted, it also depends on what's going on in that area. If there's nobody living there, then obviously why would there be a random sculpture, but you don't know. So I love to just every once in a while just go on Google Maps and zoom out and in and pick different areas, and then I write those things down on OneNote to keep a note for next map I make. There it is.
Actually, when you talked about the sculpture, that makes me think it's like that's more interesting if you do find a sculpture someplace and there aren't people there.
Oh yeah, you'll find tons and tons and tons of runes in the most odd, like, you'll zoom in and it's like, what is that? And you'll spend like a ridiculous amount of time trying to figure out why there's what looks like an old rune building in the middle of a jungle in like South Africa. I'm like, what is this? And I start Googling it to find out, and I find nothing on it. And I'm like, I start creating stories, and it's amazing because there's actually quite a lot of our planet that isn't as inhabited as we presume it to be.
That's also a cool tip. So guys, just the Google Maps, just randomly zooming in on areas that you don't think anything's going on. TrueMate has a question. Have you made any maps where part of the drawn map is actually a monster?
Where part of the drawn map, you mean in the, I'd say, how do I explain it? I've drawn maps where the coastline are supposed to resemble specific things. I've drawn a couple of maps where what you think is an island is actually a creature. I think that's the closest I've gotten to those. I do have some projects coming up in the next year that should be interesting, but
I think the island that's actually a monster would qualify.
Okay. I was like, I was not 100% sure what they're asking. So,
do you well, we had talked about doing a giant dragon turtle that is like a hollow world inside the shell.
Oh, nice.
There's like a whole ecosystem on its back, and then there's ways to get kind of like in the shell, and it's like a hollow world.
Right.
So, do you have any of your projects that are coming up this year you want to talk about?
Well, I have one, which is probably so. So as a DM, I love making props. So most of my players who's ever played the game with me absolutely know that they go home with armfuls of crap. But probably the favorite one is I make essentially used to make like riddles and treasure maps. And they were really just unique puzzles. They take a lot of time to do, and they generally have to have a specific sort of storyline that goes along with it. But I want to start making those again.
Oh, cool. I'm sure that's something GMs will really appreciate.
Oh, they're really neat. They're just they probably will not be for specific commissions because they are extremely time consuming. And essentially what it is a lot of them fold up to provide answers to parts of the riddle or part of the map, or, you know, just it's kind of hard to explain. I will make a video on it though when I actually make them and
Cool.
show everyone how they're made.
Are you then good at riddles? Because I suck at riddles.
I'm good at deciphering them. Kind of good. I think I'm good at writing them. I don't know. Most of my players will tell you how frustrated they get with the stuff that I've written. How am I supposed to answer this? I don't know what that means, you know. So I'm assuming, yeah.
Well, I assume if you make a lot of riddles, you're probably good at making them.
Yeah.
Where someone is not good at making them isn't going to spend a lot of time doing it.
Yeah. They're more or less like the answers are always within the map itself, which confused my players in the very beginning until I actually said, like, the map has the answers. Wink, wink. You know. And then they finally like, oh, wait. Oh, and realized that everything was actually written on the map itself.
They're like, I got it. I know. They have to put on the map. Whenever I use any kind of riddle, I always have to Google search for something.
Right.
So Kenyatta wants to know, have you ever been inspired by a setting and decided to create a map for it simply out of love or interest? I think the Skyrim maps.
Yeah, yep. Skyrim, Faerun, now Tal'Dorei. Let's see, what else have I made? I think those are probably my 3 biggest fandoms that I've made maps for. I'm like, did I make a map for anything else that I'm particularly a fan? I mean, I've been asked to make maps for other people's fandoms, but I think that's pretty much it for me. I'm a huge Elder Scrolls fan, so that started the whole thing. Who knew?
That's where it all began. So do you have any speculations for the upcoming season of Critical Role?
No, I actually, on my Discord, we've all been talking about it. And I'm like, I don't even want to guess. I want to be completely surprised. I don't even want to like come up with like a remote idea. I was absolutely delighted with what they started. The first time I discovered them, which was probably 8 months into them live streaming. I don't even want to speculate. I'm so excited.
I think we're going to have a speculation article go up on the website sometime this week before the episode, before they go live on Thursday.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Now I'm one of those people. I don't want to ever know the ending of the story until I actually read it. Don't tell me anything. I want the raw emotion of just seeing it as it happens.
So are you able to watch / listen to like things like Critical Role while you're drawing?
Oh yeah. It's actually when I first binged it, that's all I listened to while I was working. So it took a lot not to make the map of Tal'Dorei before now. I was like, oh, I need to. No, I'm not gonna. I'll wait.
How far from completion are you on that map?
The map itself is done. I'm doing the landscape, the illustrations for it, and I have one illustration that I'm finishing up. Hold on, I'll show you guys the map because I have it handy. I think. I'm like putting things. Oh, so this is the, so what I do, because everyone asked me this question as well. My maps are made in layers. So I draw the landscape, color it, and then I make the illustrations. And I do things like this. So the illustrations are separate, and then they're scanned, and then they're put into Photoshop. And they're added in layers so I can resize them, move them around, but also so everyone else gets to use, there it is, gets to use the illustrations for their own maps. So this is the landscape of Tal'Dorei right now. So it's done.
Looks
and
great.
proof that it's a paper. Because I get a lot of people like, is that sculpted? No, it's on paper. So
So
I just create an optical illusion.
Do you draw everything individually, scan it in, and then add it, like
yes.
put it together?
Yeah. I do that one because I'm not perfect. If I screw something up, that's it. Crap, I gotta start all over again. And because sometimes I change my mind halfway through it. I was like, oh, this would be better. And then on top of it, like I said, is if I do them individually, then you get to take any of the illustrations that I make and add them to your own maps. So it also gives DMs a good resource to make their own maps with. So
that is actually cool, by having the pieces and layers. Now I will say, like, I've heard other artists talk about why they prefer working digitally as opposed to hand drawn and stuff like that. It's like they do something and the client's like, that's great, but can it be blue instead? And when it's digital, it's just like a couple of clicks and now it's blue.
Right. Oh, well, I can do the same thing. I just take into Photoshop and then manipulate the color there.
Yeah.
But if the original is no longer going to be blue, is always going to be blue, I should say. But I can't do digital. Well, one, I have a hard time in digital. I need, as a visually impaired person, I do need things to be a little bit more tactile. And when you're drawing on glass, there's nothing there really. There's no sensation to it. So I tend not to like it. It doesn't cross over very well for me. I don't think one is better than the other by any means. I dislike when other artists are like, oh, hand drawn is better. It's not better. It's just different. I don't have a problem with anyone who takes a stamp tool in what's the name of that, Incarnate, and makes a map. As long as you're creating a map that has a story and that you and your players can use, go for it, by any means.
I agree. I mean, like, we look the same way with gaming. It's whatever works for you, that's fine.
Yeah.
For me, when it comes to art, it doesn't matter. I'm inept no matter what medium I use. So
right. Well, that's why there's people like me who, like, you can hire.
Exactly. Builds like almost like dioramas with dolls, and photographs them.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have well, all right, well, hopefully soon I'll post pictures of them. So in the cabinets around my house, I have like little fair worlds. I buy miniatures from artists in the RPG community, and I make little homes for them because why not? And I like supporting the community, huh?
So everybody needs a home.
Yeah, it's my thing is, like, I do work from home, and I talk to a lot of people about how hard this actually is. The hardest thing that anyone who works for themselves or at home learns is that you really need to be motivated, and it's really hard to motivate yourself. And one of the ways that I always recommend, a way to motivate yourself to want to create and everything else and not get lost and sucked into the endless cycle of YouTube videos is to create a magical world around you, things that really inspire you to do things, or things that, spark your imagination. And my entire house looks like that. I look like I live on some really bizarre movie set. Something like, from the Dark Crystal probably is the closest we're going to get.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
Although I do want to say Nerdarchy does not endorse not being sucked into YouTube videos forever.
Oh, okay. This is true. This is true.
We're a little biased, though.
Unless you can make money off of it, it is kind of hard to work from home and want. Well, if they're playing in the background, that's fine.
No, I agree. I actually, that is one of my biggest problems. Is like people always will ask me about other content, and I just don't take in a lot of other content, especially because one of my duties is video editing. So you can't. It's impossible to do anything else when you're video editing.
Right.
And I'm not that good at it to begin with, so I don't need any distractions.
You don't need any further distractions. That's one of the reasons I love what I do. I get to consume a lot of other media while I'm working. So.
Yeah, and then that's definitely an awesome thing. I know a lot of people have jobs where they can kind of consume and do what they're doing why they do it. Our web editor Doug watches a ton of the different D&D shows, or listens to them, I should say, because his day job, he's like, I just move around boxes on the screen all day. So I generally don't have to think about it too much.
Right.
So Zarif Gaming has a question for you. What are some of your favorite landmarks you've created for a map?
Oh, favorite landmarks. So I have a map that I'm probably going to end up redoing. It was based on Greek mythology. It was one that I kind of did for myself just because we were going to start up another game. And every once in a while, me and a group of friends actually kind of like pick like a particular theme. And we decided that we were going to do Greek mythology. So I made this huge map with Poseidon, like a gigantic statue of Poseidon, and several Grecian temples. And it was probably it's actually a not very good map because I didn't have the proper tools at the time. I drew the whole thing on watercolor paper, which is really thick and very textured. And I think I used Sharpies. but it was a lot of fun to create. But I think I really, really like it had a ton of runes in it, and that's always my favorite, is to draw the runes. So, and for some reason, drawing swampland, the little symbols, it's one of my favorite cartography icons.
Swamplands, swamps and marshes.
Yeah.
Although I totally get drawing runes. Runes are fun, and the nice thing about runes is you don't need a ton of skill to do like half decent runes. Yeah. If you have more skill, they're better, but you can get away.
Oh yeah. In my class, I'm like, here's how you make a rune, and I just literally just draw like a half wall with a little squiggly line, like just vague, and let it be vague because when you're looking at a treetop, you're only going to see parts of it anyhow. So,
where can people find your class, your course?
On my website on ruinc.com.
Okay, is that part of the membership? Is that a separate thing?
It's part of the membership. So for $6 a month. You can, not only do you get to access all of my colored illustrations, blank maps, tavern signs, everything else, but you can also take all of my tutorials. And I've only got a couple up there, but they kind of work for, like learning how to make the prop maps and aged paper and everything. But I had the cartography class on there. And it depends on how much time you have, but even if you're working a full time and you're only doing it at night, you can usually get it done within a month. So it's mostly videos and reading articles, and sort of just like explains how geography works, what you're looking to actually accomplish in a map, how to come up with names, and then videos on how to draw the very basics of like trees, mountains, runes, that kind of thing. So just to give you a really good start. And then once you actually kind of like dive into the course a little, by all means, come on my live stream and ask me a bazillion questions. I can talk maps until I have no voice left.
Well, that might be a little bit of a dangerous thing to throw out into the internet, but
Yeah, no, I know. Well, I get asked anyhow. It doesn't matter. People will come on and ask me all sorts of questions, so I'm already answering them. So
nice. So people, if you want a primer you into creating maps, check that out. That's definitely a cool thing. I got one more question here. I was going to wrap up there, but it's kind of an interesting question, so I figured I'd grab it real quick from Brian Smith.
okay.
Most maps most maps were used. Wait a minute. Most maps were used to. I think there's some words missing there, but the gist of it, most maps are made for humans to use. What about maps that have been made for non-humans to use?
So essentially, so most maps were not made for navigation. Maps that we actually use for navigation look very different than a lot of the maps that we have now. A perfect example is a road map. Like if you pick up a road map now, the reason it looks very plain and just roads is because otherwise you would get so lost with all the other cartography information on it. Anyone who actually does cartography for a living, where they are assessing the data that we get from surveys and everything else, it's a lot of information. So maps, in how we think of them in the fantasy genre, is that maps originally were made almost as a form of propaganda. They depended entirely on who commissioned the map to be done. Kings would commission a map to be done to prove how much land they owned, even if it was inaccurate. I'll always think of the map of Siam. At one point showed Siam huge, like taking over the size of most of Europe, and then meanwhile Siam, Europe, but it was propaganda. So a lot of maps are representational, and that's how I ended up steering my maps now. So when you're creating it, oh god, so hard to explain. So much easier while I'm making it. But yeah, you actually end up taking things comparatively different. Like the map of Tal'Dorei, I had to redraw it like 4 or 5 times because scale-wise was wrong, and it wasn't very representational. But keep in mind, your maps should be representational, not exact, because your players are going to get from point A to point B, regardless of how long the map tells them it'll take them. What you're trying to do is convey all the other information that they need on top of that, and that'll fill in far more of the map than space allows.
So, well, I guess what the original poster, the question is kind of asking, like, have you ever thought of a map in terms of this is being made by a Grimlock? They live in a sightless world they don't see, or this is an Illithid that maybe uses its tentacles to read as much as its eyes.
Oh, I see what you mean. I thought you meant like, okay. Yeah, actually, I have a couple of maps that I've made where specifically the writing on it was in different languages. The maps that I make, though, essentially look like the landscape. So even if they don't all call it a tree, it'll still look the same to them, hopefully. I have drawn things where it's specifically for a particular race. I had a friend of mine who, I forgot the name that he created for his race, but everything he liked the idea that I saw in 2D and wanted something where everything was very tactile for them. So there was cross hatching all over this map to represent, buildings and stuff. So they weren't actual shapes of buildings; they were just cross hatching. And you can make that for anything. Just keep in mind, you have to make it consistent or your players really notice. Don't break the physics of your world. Players really notice this.
It's true. With any fandom, whether it's one you created or someone else created.
Yeah.
They know.
Yeah, they do.
Well, we're past the hour mark, so I want to thank you for coming on, Evan. I really appreciate it.
I loved it. It was great.
And I want to thank everyone for hanging out with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, with a new guest.
I won't be here.
And again, thanks for coming on. And until next time, guys, stay nerdy.